Have you ever thought about this? Is there, like, a perfect set of laws out there that could fix any country's economy? A kind of universal legal code that, if you just plugged it in, would guarantee growth and stability. It's a really powerful, really tempting idea. But, as we're about to find out, the reality is a whole lot more complex and, yeah, kind of paradoxical.
For decades, this exact idea has been pushed by some huge global institutions, like the International Monetary Fund. They've been promoting this concept called legal standardization. Basically, the idea is to create one set of best practice laws for things like finance and trade, and then just give them to developing countries. The logic seems simple, right? If it worked for a developed economy, it should work everywhere.
So let's break this all down. First, we're going to look at this quest for the perfect law. Then, we'll get into what legal standardization actually means. After that, we'll dive into the 3 big reasons why these supposedly good laws often totally fail in the real world. And finally, we'll explore a better way to do things and see why, when it comes to the law, local context is everything.
All right, so let's start with the dream itself. This really simple, very appealing idea that you can just find a universal legal fix for some really deep-rooted economic problems. And you can see why this idea is so intuitive, right? It's kind of like upgrading the operating system on your computer. If the old one is buggy and slow, what do? You just install the latest, most efficient version and bam, everything runs better. The idea of just taking a successful legal model and transplanting it somewhere else follows that same very seductive logic.
So this whole approach actually has a formal name, and it's really at the heart of a lot of global development programs. Let's take a look at what it is and how it's supposed to work in a perfect world. And that term is legal standardization. The whole goal is to harmonize, or align, laws across different countries. The thinking is that this creates one clear, predictable set of rules, which should, in theory, make things cheaper and easier for investors and improve legal systems everywhere.
So the idealized process looks something like this. Step 1. A bunch of international experts get together and design what they think are the absolute best laws. Step 2. Developing countries adopt these new legal codes. And step 3, their economies just flourish. It's simple, it's clean, it's linear. But here's the thing, it almost never, ever works this way.
So why does this seemingly perfect process just completely fall apart? Well, the source paper for this explainer from Katerina Pistor points to 3 fundamental flaws in this model. These are the reasons that a perfect law can fail, and fail spectacularly when it actually meets the real world. Okay. Flaw number 1 is what you could call the interdependence of rules. A law almost never works in a vacuum. Think about it. Imagine trying to import a really complex bankruptcy law into a country that doesn't have a solid, enforceable idea of private property. It's kind of like a new guitarist joining a band that plays a completely different kind of music. Without the rest of the band, the supporting legal stuff like property rights, contract law, independent courts, it's just a bunch of noise.
Second, you've got this problem of what the source calls law as a cognitive institution. And this is really fascinating. What it means is that for a law to actually work, the people using it, the judges, the lawyers, the regular citizens, they all have to understand it in the same way. The meaning isn't just in the words on the page, it's in the shared culture. So, if you introduce a law based on some abstract duty of care into a society where, say, family obligation always comes first, well, the way it gets interpreted is going to be wildly different from what the writers intended. It gets completely lost in translation.
And the third flaw, this one might be the most important: enforcement. You can have the most beautifully written law in the entire world, but if nobody enforces it, it's just words on a page. And for a law to be effective, you need 2 things. First, people have to voluntarily follow it most of the time. And second, the government has to have the resources to step in when they don't. If you don't have both, a transplanted law will just be ignored, or, even worse, people will find clever ways to get around it.
And this quote from the source just nails it. The actual text of the law you're importing is way less important than how that law gets developed and whether it actually fits with the local legal, social, and economic reality. In other words, the process matters a whole lot more than the product. So if just copying and pasting best practice laws is a bad idea, what's the alternative? Well, the author suggests we need to shift our thinking from trying to provide a single perfect answer to providing a better set of tools.
The difference is kind of like being handed a single really rigid recipe versus being given an entire cookbook. The old way gives you one recipe and says, follow this exactly, even if you don't have the right ingredients. The new way, the better way, gives you access to a ton of options, letting you choose and adapt a recipe that actually works for your kitchen. It's all about fostering local ownership.
So what does this cookbook approach actually look like?
Well, it's not about hiding information. It's about providing more of it and better context. It means giving local lawmakers access to a huge variety of legal solutions from all over the world, letting them see how these laws really function in their home countries, these living legal systems. This empowers the local experts to figure out their own problems and build solutions that they actually understand, that they believe in, and that they can realistically afford to enforce.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. Why does this whole debate, the single recipe versus the cookbook, why does it actually matter in the real world of global investment and development?
Well, here's the huge risk. A country might just adopt a bunch of international laws to signal to foreign investors that, hey, we're a safe place to put your money. It's basically a marketing move. But if those laws aren't really a part of the local system, if they're not truly enforced, then that signal is a lie. And when a crisis hits, and it always does, investors suddenly find out that the legal protections they thought they had just aren't there. They flee, and that makes the crisis so much worse. It can destroy trust for years.
So what are the big takeaways here? First, the how is way more important than the what. The process of actually creating a law with real local buy-in matters more than the specific text. Second, you just can't impose a legal system from the outside. There has to be a real local demand for it to stick. And finally, and this is the big one, context is king. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all perfect law.
And all of this leaves us with a final, really crucial question to think about. In this big project of trying to build better institutions all over the world, what's actually more effective? Is it exporting what we think are the right answers? Or is it sharing a better library of solutions, of options, and maybe most importantly, of questions, empowering people to find the answers that are truly right for them?